The mountain man married the abandoned bride the same day. He found her standing alone at Copper Ridge Station, her wedding dress gathering dust, while her intended groom rode away with her dowry money. Ophelia Crown held her spine straight as marble. The small crowd of onlookers whispered behind gloved hands. Their words cut deeper than Wyoming wind. Too fat, they said. Unsuitable. Not what he ordered. Harold Wickham had taken one look at her and declared the arrangement void. He pocketed her traveling money and spurred his horse toward the horizon, left her with nothing but a trunk full of books and the taste of humiliation. The station platform felt endless under her feet. Every eye measured her worth and found her lacking. She clutched her carpetbag tighter, refused to let them see her tremble. That was when he stepped forward. Ezekiel Thornfield emerged from the trading post like something carved from the mountains themselves. Broad shoulders, weathered hands, beard the color of winter storms. He moved through the crowd without hurry, his boots heavy on the wooden planks. He stopped in front of her, studied her face with eyes the color of granite. The whispers died. "Ma'am." His voice carried the weight of 15 years alone. "If you'll have me, I'll marry you right here, right now." The words fell into silence thick as snowfall. Ophelia's breath caught. She searched his face for mockery and found none, only something that might have been loneliness recognizing itself. The crowd stirred. Someone laughed. Another voice called out that he must be joking. Mountain men didn't marry abandoned mail-order brides, especially not ones like her. But Zeke never looked away from her face. Ophelia had taught school for 6 years before answering that marriage advertisement. She knew how to read people. This man standing before her carried no cruelty in his expression, no pity either, just a strange sort of recognition. Her choices spread before her like winter paths. Return east in shame. Try to survive alone in hostile territory, or trust this stranger who offered salvation without condition. Yes. The word left her lips before fear could stop it. Zeke nodded once. Preacher Williams. The circuit preacher had been watching from the station house doorway. He stepped forward slowly, Bible clutched in uncertain hands. His face showed the bewilderment of a man asked to perform miracles on short notice. "You sure about this, Thornfield?" "Never been more sure of anything." Preacher Williams looked between them. Two strangers about to bind themselves in holy matrimony. No banns posted, no courtship, no sense to any of it. But Zeke was already reaching into his coat pocket. He pulled out a simple gold band, worn smooth by time. His mother's ring, carried for 15 years through mountain winters and summer storms. The ceremony lasted 5 minutes. Preacher Williams spoke the words quickly, as if speed might make the whole thing less strange. Ophelia's hands shook when Zeke slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Zeke didn't kiss her, just nodded again and picked up her trunk as if it weighed nothing. The crowd began to disperse. The show was over. The abandoned bride had been claimed by the mountain man. Strange things happened in frontier towns, but this would be talked about for months. Ophelia followed her new husband toward 2 horses tied at the station rail. The larger one was clearly his. A sturdy bay mare waited beside it, already saddled. "Can you ride?" "Some." She had ridden in Philadelphia parks, nothing like what frontier life would demand. Zeke secured her trunk behind his saddle with practiced efficiency. His movements were economical, no wasted motion. A man accustomed to solving problems without fanfare. "It's a day's ride to the cabin." He handed her the bay's reins. "We'll take it slow." She gathered her skirts and mounted with more grace than he expected. Another surprise. This woman carried herself with dignity despite everything that had happened to her. They rode out of Copper Ridge Station as the sun reached its peak. Behind them, the small town settled back into its regular rhythm. Ahead lay mountain country that tested everyone who entered it. Neither spoke for the first hour. The silence stretched between them, filled with questions neither was ready to ask. What kind of man married a stranger out of impulse? What kind of woman accepted? The trail wound upward through pine forests that seemed to swallow sound. Ophelia's horse followed Zeke's without guidance, accustomed to this route. She began to understand that her new husband made this journey regularly, trading trips perhaps, or simple human contact with the world below. When they stopped beside a creek to water the horses, Zeke finally broke the quiet. "You'll want to know what you've gotten yourself into." Ophelia dismounted and smoothed her skirts. Her wedding dress was already showing signs of trail dust. Soon it would bear no resemblance to the pristine garment she had worn that morning. "I suppose I will. I live alone, have for 15 years. Cabin's clean but rough. No fancy things," she nodded. "I wasn't expecting fancy things. Winter's coming early this year, will be snowed in by November." "I see." He studied her face again, looking for fear maybe, or regret. Found neither. "Why did you do it?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Zeke crouched beside the creek and cupped water in his palms, drank slowly. When he straightened, his eyes held something she couldn't name. "Because you didn't beg." The answer settled between them like truth spoken aloud. She had faced humiliation with dignity intact, had refused to grovel or plead for mercy from people who showed her none. They remounted and continued upward. The afternoon light slanted through the trees, painting everything gold. Ophelia began to see beauty in this harsh country. It demanded strength but offered something Philadelphia never had: freedom. As evening approached, smoke began rising from a distant chimney. Home. Whatever that would mean now. The trunk of books proved heavier than expected. Zeke lifted it from his horse without complaint, but Ophelia caught the slight strain in his shoulders. Everything she owned weighed more than his entire worldly possessions. Inside the trunk lay volumes of Shakespeare, Whitman, teaching primers. Books that had sustained her through 6 years of instructing ungrateful children in Philadelphia. Now they seemed absurd in this wilderness setting. "You read much?" Zeke set the trunk down carefully. "Every day." She ran her fingers along the worn leather spines. "Do you?" "Some, not well." The admission came without shame. Mountain living required different skills than book learning. She understood this already. The cabin stood solid against the tree line. Logs chinked tight with mud and moss. A stone chimney promised warmth through winter months. Simple, clean, built by hands that knew their trade. Ophelia stepped inside and breathed deeply. Pine smoke and leather. Coffee grounds and something that might have been lavender soap. A man's space but not uncivilized. One room served multiple purposes. Kitchen area near the stone hearth. A table hewn from single piece of oak. Shelves holding supplies and tools. In the far corner, a bed covered with wool blankets. One bed. The reality settled between them like morning frost. They were married strangers who knew nothing of each other's habits. Sleeping arrangements would need discussion. But not yet. Zeke busied himself building up the fire. Ophelia unpacked her trunk methodically. Each book found temporary space on his rough shelves. Her teaching supplies arranged themselves beside his hunting gear. 2 lives attempting merger. "You taught school?" Not a question. He had noticed the primers and slate. 6 years. Children mostly unwilling to learn. Why stop? The question touched something raw. Ophelia folded her extra dress with careful precision. The school board preferred younger teachers, less expensive ones. Zeke understood dismissal. He had tasted it himself, though for different reasons. Evening brought their first shared meal. Salt pork and beans. Coffee strong enough to wake the dead. She ate without complaint, though it bore no resemblance to Philadelphia fare. He watched her adapt. No sighing over lost luxuries. No tears for her abandoned life. Just quiet acceptance of circumstances beyond her control. After supper, she pulled out a volume of poetry, opened it to a marked passage, and began reading aloud. Her voice carried the rhythm of someone accustomed to making words come alive. Zeke listened from across the table. The verses spoke of loneliness and longing, things he understood better than most. "Your voice is good for that." "Thank you," she closed the book gently. "Would you like me to teach you, to read better, I mean?" The offer hung between them. She wasn't offering charity, just exchange of one skill for another. "What would you want in return?" To learn what you know about surviving here, fair trade, knowledge for knowledge, the sleeping arrangement solved itself simply. Zeke took his blankets to the hearth, left her the bed without discussion. Gentlemen honored such boundaries, even in wilderness settings. But sleep came slowly for both. Morning revealed frost on the cabin windows. Winter approached with mountain urgency. Zeke began her education immediately. First lesson concerned the horses, how to saddle properly, how to read their moods and needs. Ophelia's hands fumbled with unfamiliar straps and buckles. Like this. His fingers covered hers, guiding the motion, calloused skin against soft palms. The contact lasted only seconds but left impressions. She learned quickly. City education had trained her mind to absorb new information. Within a week, she could saddle both horses without assistance. His reading lessons progressed more slowly. 15 years of solitude had left gaps in his learning, but he possessed natural intelligence dulled by lack of practice. She chose simple passages first, adventure stories that held his attention. Her finger traced beneath each word, patient as she had been with reluctant students. You're a good teacher. You're a willing student. That makes the difference. October painted the mountains in shades of fire. They worked together gathering winter supplies, chopping wood, preserving meat, preparing for months of isolation. Ophelia's soft hands developed calluses. Her pale skin bronzed under autumn sun. The woman who had stepped off that train in wedding finery was transforming into something harder, more practical, but she never lost her dignity. Zeke found himself watching her more often. The way she hummed while working, how she arranged wildflowers in a tin cup to brighten the table, small touches that made his rough cabin feel different, feel like home. The first snow came early, just as he predicted. Fat flakes that fell steady and silent. By morning, the world wore white 3 inches deep. They stood at the cabin window watching the transformation, shoulder to shoulder, breathing fog on the glass. Beautiful, she murmured. Dangerous, too. This is just the beginning. She nodded, already understanding that mountain beauty came paired with mountain threats. That afternoon brought visitors. 3 riders emerging from the tree line like ghosts materialized from the storm. Zeke's hand moved instinctively toward his rifle. Stay inside. Ophelia obeyed but watched through the window. She recognized the tension in her husband's shoulders, the careful way he stepped onto the porch. The lead rider called out greetings that sounded false, too friendly for the circumstances. His companions remained mounted, hands resting near their weapons. Heard you got yourself a wife, Thornfield. News travels fast. Curious thing. Man your age taking a bride, especially one that was thrown away by another. The insult landed like a physical blow, but Zeke's expression never changed. My wife is no concern of yours, Morrison. Ophelia filed the name away. The trading post owner who had been so cold during their supply run. Everything in these mountains concerns me, you know that. I know you should move along. Weather's turning. The riders lingered another moment, measuring, calculating. Then Morrison touched his hat brim in mock courtesy. Give our regards to the missus. They disappeared into the falling snow as quietly as they had come. Zeke remained on the porch long after they vanished. When he finally came inside, his face carried shadows that hadn't been there before. Friends of yours? No, the word held finality, but also worry. That night, he checked the rifle twice before banking the fire, made sure the door was barred solid. Small actions that spoke of larger concerns. Ophelia pretended not to notice, but she understood that their peaceful isolation might not last. Something was coming with the winter, something that had nothing to do with weather. The cabin transformed under Ophelia's hands. What had been merely functional became something warmer. She stitched curtains from spare fabric, arranged his few books beside her many volumes, hung dried herbs from the rafters in neat bundles. Zeke watched the changes with wonder. 15 years of bachelor existence had dulled his sense of comfort. Now lamplight caught on small improvements everywhere. A cushion sewn from old blankets, wildflowers pressed between book pages and mounted on the walls. Home. The word carried new weight now. November snow fell heavier. The world outside shrank to what they could see from frost-covered windows. But inside, warmth grew between them daily. Their evening lessons continued by firelight. Ophelia guided his reading through adventure tales and poetry. Her patience never wavered when he stumbled over difficult passages. Try again. Sound it out. His large fingers traced beneath the words. Letters that had seemed foreign now began revealing their secrets. The satisfaction of understanding spread across his weathered features. In return, he taught her mountain survival, how to read weather in cloud formations, which plants could heal and which could kill, how to move silently through snow without leaving obvious tracks. She proved surprisingly adept with the rifle. Her teacher's steady hands adapted quickly to weapons training. By December, she could hit pine cones at 50 yards. "You're a natural. Good teachers make learning possible." The compliment carried deeper meaning. They had become teachers for each other, not just of skills but of hope. Winter nights stretched long and cold. They sat close by the fire, sharing warmth and stories. Ophelia spoke of her students in Philadelphia, children who challenged her patience but earned her affection. Zeke shared fragments of his past more carefully. Childhood on a Missouri farm, parents who valued hard work and simple faith, military service that started with pride and ended in disillusionment. But he never mentioned why he deserted. That shadow remained locked away. Christmas Eve brought the heaviest snowfall yet. Drifts piled against the cabin walls. Wind howled through the pines with voices that sounded almost human. Ophelia had fashioned simple gifts from available materials. A bookmark carved from pine and decorated with pressed flowers. New socks knitted from unraveled wool. Zeke's offering was more practical. A knife sheath crafted from leather sized for her hands. The tooling showed hours of careful work. For your protection, she understood. Beauty was fine, but survival mattered more. They shared a quiet meal by candlelight. Salt pork dressed with wild onions she had dried. Coffee sweetened with the last of her hoarded sugar. Simple fare that tasted rich in present company. Later, she read aloud from Dickens, a Christmas story about redemption and second chances. Her voice filled the cabin with words about lonely souls finding unexpected joy. Zeke listened from his chair beside the hearth. Firelight played across his features, softening the hard edges that weather and solitude had carved there. When she finished reading, silence settled between them, but not the empty quiet of strangers. Something deeper, more comfortable. "Why did you accept?" The question emerged from the crackling flames. "That day at the station. Why say yes to a man you didn't know?" Ophelia closed the book slowly. Her fingers traced the worn cover while she considered her answer. "Because you saw me, not what I wasn't, not what others expected, just me." The honesty hung between them heavy as smoke. "What did you see in return?" "A man who understood what it meant to be cast aside." The truth cut deeper than intended. Zeke's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She had touched something he kept hidden. "I wasn't cast aside. I chose this." "Did you?" The gentle challenge stopped his protests. Maybe choice and circumstance weren't so different. Maybe they had both been running from something when they found each other. New Year arrived without ceremony. Just another day of snow and wind and firelight. But something had shifted between them. The careful politeness of strangers was giving way to something more honest, more dangerous. Ophelia caught herself watching him work, the economy of his movements, the quiet competence that spoke of long self-reliance. When he smiled at something she read aloud, warmth spread through her chest. Zeke found reasons to sit closer during lessons. Their hands brushed when he helped with cooking. Her scent mixed with wood smoke and coffee, lavender soap and something uniquely her. Neither acknowledged the growing attraction. Both feared what admission might cost. January brought a brief thaw. Zeke decided they needed fresh meat before the next storm arrived. He prepared his hunting gear with practiced efficiency. "I'll be back before dark." Ophelia nodded from her seat by the fire. She had learned not to worry over his hunting trips. He knew these mountains better than most men knew their own property, but this time felt different. "Zeke." She rose and crossed to where he stood checking his rifle. "Be careful." Something in her voice made him look up. Real concern. Not just politeness. "Always am." She reached out without thinking. Her hand touched his arm briefly, a gesture that spoke of feelings neither had named aloud. He left carrying the memory of that touch. Alone in the cabin, Ophelia tried to focus on mending, but her thoughts kept drifting to dangerous territory. When had this arrangement become something more? When had gratitude transformed into genuine affection, into love? The word terrified her. Love required vulnerability, trust, things that had been broken in both their pasts. While organizing his few possessions, she found it, a wooden box hidden beneath spare blankets. Inside lay military papers, medals, and a photograph of a younger Zeke in cavalry uniform. Desertion papers bore official seals and damning language, but the details told a different story. Refusal to follow orders, insubordination during an engagement with hostile forces. The final document revealed everything. Orders to participate in an attack on a peaceful native village. Families, children, innocents who posed no military threat. Zeke had refused, walked away from his unit rather than participate in massacre. The papers fell from her trembling fingers. He hadn't deserted from cowardice. He had chosen conscience over career, honor over orders. The sound of approaching horses interrupted her thoughts. But these weren't Zeke's familiar footsteps on the porch. Multiple riders, moving with purpose through the snow. Ophelia quickly replaced the papers and closed the box. Whatever was coming, she would face it without revealing what she had learned. The knock on the door came sharp and demanding. She gripped the rifle Zeke had taught her to use. Winter visits meant trouble in mountain country. Through the window she counted 3 men, armed, watching the tree line for signs of her husband's return. "Mrs. Thornfield, open up, just want to talk." The voice belonged to Morrison from the trading post, but his tone suggested conversation wasn't his primary goal. "My husband isn't here. We know, saw him heading up toward Eagle Ridge, won't be back for hours." The knowledge chilled her more than winter wind. They had been watching, waiting for Zeke to leave her alone. "What do you want?" "Just a friendly chat about your husband's past, about choices he made." Morrison knew about the desertion. The threat hung unspoken in the frozen air. Ophelia checked the rifle's load and settled by the window. Whatever these men wanted, they wouldn't get it easily. The siege of winter had become something more dangerous. The siege of secrets about to surface. Spring thaw forced them down from the mountain. Supplies ran low despite careful rationing. The trading post at Morrison's Crossing offered the only source of goods within 50 miles. Ophelia prepared for the journey with quiet determination. She had learned to move efficiently in mountain country. Her movements carried new confidence earned through winter survival. Zeke watched her secure provisions with practiced hands. The woman who had struggled with horse tack 6 months ago now handled wilderness travel naturally. "Stay close when we reach town." She understood the warning. Mountain isolation had sheltered them from certain realities. Town brought different dangers. Morrison's Crossing squatted beside the creek like something diseased. Raw timber buildings. Mud streets carved by wagon wheels. Men who measured worth in gold dust and ammunition. They rode into town side by side. Eyes followed their progress with the hungry attention of predators scenting weakness. The trading post dominated the main street. Morrison himself emerged as they tied their horses. His smile held no warmth. Well, the happy couple. Survived your first winter, I see." Zeke nodded tersely. Ophelia remained silent, but her spine stayed straight under the scrutiny. Inside, the post reeked of tobacco and unwashed bodies. Men clustered around barrels and shelves like vultures waiting for carrion. Their conversation died when Ophelia entered. She moved toward the fabric section with measured steps, refused to acknowledge the stares that followed her movements, but tension crackled through the air thick as smoke. "Don't serve her kind here." The voice came from somewhere behind the tobacco barrels. Morrison's laugh sounded forced. Now, boys. Money's money, regardless of where it comes from. But his service turned deliberately slow. Each item weighed with insulting precision. Prices quoted higher than marked. Small humiliations designed to drive them away. Ophelia endured it with dignity that shamed their petty cruelty. She examined goods carefully, made selections based on quality and need, ignored the whispered comments about her appearance and race. Zeke's jaw tightened with each passing insult. His hand drifted toward his sidearm. The gesture wasn't lost on the watching men. Careful, Thornfield wouldn't want any accidents. The threat came wrapped in false concern, but underlying menace was clear enough. That was when Morrison made his mistake. Funny thing about accidents, sometimes they reveal interesting information, like old military records, desertion papers, things that make a man's life complicated. The words hit Zeke like physical blows. His face went pale beneath the weathered tan. Ophelia stepped closer to her husband, a gesture of solidarity that spoke louder than words. "Is there a problem here?" Her voice carried the authority of 6 years teaching unruly children. Clear, steady, unafraid, Morrison's eyes narrowed. "No problem at all, missus. Just making conversation about your husband's interesting past." "My husband's past is his own concern." "Oh, but some pasts have a way of catching up, especially when there's profit in sharing certain information with certain authorities." Blackmail. The ugly word hung unspoken between them. Zeke's hand moved fully to his weapon now. The watching men shifted position, anticipating violence. But Ophelia surprised them all. She reached deliberately into their coin purse, counted out exact payment for their purchases, placed the money on Morrison's counter with precision. "We'll take our goods now." Her calm response diffused the tension momentarily, but Morrison wasn't finished. "Might want to consider relocating, Thornfield. Mountains can be dangerous for folks with complicated histories, especially when they're protecting someone who doesn't belong." The racial slur came disguised as concern, but its poison was unmistakable. That broke Zeke's restraint. He stepped forward until he loomed over Morrison's smaller frame. When he spoke, his voice carried the quiet menace of mountain storms. "My wife belongs wherever she chooses to be. Anyone suggesting otherwise might find themselves on the wrong end of an unfortunate accident." The promise of violence shimmered between them. Morrison's cronies reached for weapons instinctively, but Ophelia moved first. She knocked over a lamp with calculated clumsiness. Kerosene spread across the wooden counter in a spreading pool. The flame caught instantly, forcing everyone to scramble backward. "Oh my, how terribly careless of me." Her apology dripped with false innocence. In the confusion of stamping out flames, she and Zeke gathered their purchases and moved toward the door. Morrison shouted curses through the smoke and chaos, but they were already mounting their horses. "This isn't finished, Thornfield." They rode out of town at a steady pace, neither hurrying nor dawdling, refusing to show fear despite the very real danger behind them. Once beyond sight of the settlement, Zeke finally spoke. "You knew about the desertion." Not a question, a statement heavy with resignation. "I found the papers while you were hunting. Read them all." He waited for condemnation, judgment, the disgust that military authorities had shown. Instead, she guided her horse closer to his. "You chose honor over orders, conscience over career. I'm proud to be married to such a man." The words hit him harder than Morrison's threats. 15 years of shame began cracking under the weight of her acceptance. "They'll use it against us. Morrison has connections. Federal marshals who ask questions first and investigate later. Then we'll face whatever comes, together." The simple declaration carried more weight than elaborate vows. They had moved beyond marriage of convenience into something deeper, something worth defending. The ride home passed in comfortable silence. Both understood that their peaceful mountain existence was ending. Forces beyond their control were gathering, but they also understood something else. They were no longer two separate people bound by circumstance. They had become partners in truth, allies against whatever storm was coming. The cabin appeared through the pine trees like sanctuary, but sanctuaries could become fortresses when necessary. That evening, Zeke cleaned his weapons with unusual care. Ophelia inventoried their ammunition and supplies. Neither spoke of specific preparations, but both knew. The war for their future had begun in Morrison's trading post. It would be decided in the mountains that had become their home. Outside, wind through the pines sounded ominous. No longer the peaceful whisper of isolation. Now it carried warnings of approaching danger. Morrison would make good on his threats. The only question was when, and whether they would be ready. Zeke checked the rifle one more time. Ophelia banked the fire against the cold night ahead. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight they had each other. It would have to be enough. They came at dawn when mist still clung to the valley floor. Harold Wickham rode at the head of 6 armed men, his face twisted with the bitter satisfaction of long-planned revenge. Zeke had been checking the horses in the small corral behind the cabin. The sound of approaching riders cut through morning stillness sharp as breaking glass. He moved toward the cabin with measured steps. No running, no panic. But his hand found the rifle leaning against the porch post. "Ophelia, stay inside." She appeared in the doorway, her own weapon ready. Winter had taught her to respond to danger without hesitation. "Ezekiel Thornfield," Wickham's voice carried across the clearing, "we need to have a conversation." "About what?" "About this land you're squatting on, about your interesting military history, about choices that need to be made." The riders spread out in a loose semicircle, professional positioning that spoke of careful planning. These weren't random drifters looking for easy money. "What do you want, Wickham?" "Simple transaction. You sign over your mining claims, and I forget what I know about your desertion. Refuse, and a federal marshal gets some very interesting paperwork." Zeke stepped off the porch into the morning light. His rifle remained casual in his grip but ready. "And if I refuse," Wickham smiled without warmth, "then your pretty wife becomes a widow, and a federal fugitive's widow at that. Hard life for a woman alone in these mountains." The threat hung in the cold air between them, but Zeke had faced worse odds during his cavalry days. "My answer is no." "I hoped you'd say that." Wickham raised his hand. His men began moving closer. That was when everything went wrong for them. 2 of Wickham's hired guns suddenly turned their weapons on their companions. The betrayal happened so quickly that the remaining men barely had time to register surprise. "Drop your weapons." The command came from one of the turncoats. Now, confusion rippled through Wickham's remaining men. They found themselves outflanked by their own allies. "What is this?" Wickham's voice cracked with rage and bewilderment. "Justice." Ophelia emerged from the cabin, her rifle trained on Wickham himself. "Something you wouldn't recognize." The truth revealed itself in pieces. During her captivity the previous night, Ophelia hadn't waited passively for rescue. She had used skills learned from 6 years of managing difficult people. She talked to Wickham's men, listened to their complaints about unpaid wages, their concerns about the legality of his schemes, their growing doubts about a boss who changed plans without warning. More importantly, she had offered them something Wickham never had: truth. "I know what kind of man Harold Wickham really is." Her voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to commanding attention. "I've been documenting his business practices for months, writing articles for Eastern newspapers about frontier corruption." The revelation struck Wickham harder than any physical blow. His face went pale beneath the morning stubble. "You're lying." "Am I?" "Tell them about the forged land deeds, Harold. The mining claims you stole from legitimate owners, the families you cheated out of their life savings." She had done more than survive her kidnapping. She had gathered evidence, built cases, prepared prosecutions. "I sent detailed reports to territorial authorities weeks ago. A federal marshal is already investigating your operations." Wickham's remaining loyal men began looking uncertain. The promise of easy money lost its appeal when federal charges entered the picture. But Wickham himself wasn't finished. "Even if that's true, your husband is still a deserter." Still a wanted man. Actually, he isn't. The new voice came from the tree line. A man emerged on horseback, wearing the silver star of a federal marshal. Behind him rode 3 deputies. Marshal Thomas Garrett had been tracking Wickham's operation for months. Ophelia's reports had provided the evidence he needed to move against the criminal network. Harold Wickham, you're under arrest for land fraud, theft, and conspiracy. But Wickham's attention remained fixed on Zeke. What about him? What about the desertion charges? Marshal Garrett consulted a document from his saddlebags. Ezekiel Thornfield received a presidential pardon last month. His refusal to participate in the Sand Creek massacre has been recognized as an act of conscience, not cowardice. The words hit like thunder in the quiet clearing. 15 years of shame and hiding dissolved in a single official pronouncement. Ophelia's journalism had reached more than territorial authorities. Her articles about frontier justice and military conscience had found their way to Washington, to people who understood the difference between desertion and moral courage. Wickham's face twisted with frustrated rage, his careful plans crumbling around him. This isn't over. Yes, it is. Zeke's quiet words carried absolute finality. He stepped forward until he towered over the smaller man. You took my wife's money, humiliated her publicly, threatened our home and our lives. He paused, letting the weight of those crimes settle. But she turned your own men against you, brought federal justice to your door, proved herself stronger than your worst intentions. Pride filled his voice when he spoke of Ophelia's courage. She had faced danger not with helpless terror but with intelligence and determination. You're finished, Wickham. Not because I defeated you, because she did. The arrests proceeded with quiet efficiency. Wickham's men surrendered without resistance. The evidence Ophelia had gathered would ensure lengthy prison sentences. As the marshal's party prepared to leave with their prisoners, Garrett approached Zeke privately. Your wife's reports were instrumental in breaking this case. She's got a good eye for corruption and the courage to expose it. She's got courage for everything. The simple statement carried months of growing admiration and love. After the riders disappeared down the mountain trail, silence returned to the clearing. But it felt different now. Not the isolation of exile, but the peace of sanctuary earned and defended. Zeke and Ophelia stood together on their porch, watching morning mist burn off the valley floor. How long have you been writing those reports? Since our first trip to the trading post. I knew Morrison and Wickham were connected. Just needed to prove it. And the presidential pardon. I wrote directly to Washington, explained what really happened at Sand Creek, why you chose conscience over orders. She had fought for his honor while he struggled with shame, restored his good name while he hid from his past. Why didn't you tell me? Ophelia turned to face him fully. Her eyes held the depth of feeling she had kept hidden for months. Because you needed to learn to forgive yourself first. The pardon was just paper. Your worth was never in question. The words broke through the last barriers between them. 15 years of loneliness and self-doubt cracked open under the warmth of complete acceptance. When he kissed her, it tasted of morning coffee and new beginnings. Their marriage had survived its first real test, not just the external threats but the internal fears that kept them apart. They were partners now in truth, allies in love, ready to face whatever future the mountains might bring. The trial lasted 3 days in the territorial courthouse. Ophelia's testimony proved damning to Wickham's defense. Her careful documentation of his crimes left no room for legal maneuvering. Judge Harrison sentenced Wickham to 15 years hard labor. His accomplices received lesser terms in exchange for cooperation. Justice moved swiftly in frontier courts when evidence was clear. Zeke watched his wife deliver her final statement with quiet pride. The woman who had been abandoned as unsuitable now commanded the respect of federal judges and territorial officials. Outside the courthouse, Marshal Garrett approached them with official papers. Presidential commendation for civilian service, rare honor for frontier journalism. Ophelia accepted the document with steady hands. Recognition felt strange after months of working in secrecy. What happens now? You've made powerful friends in Washington. Your writing opened eyes about corruption in territorial administration. There's talk of reform, new oversight. The Marshal paused, studying them both. Course, that kind of influence comes with opportunities, government positions, Eastern newspaper jobs, comfortable life away from all this. The offer hung between them like morning mist. Return to civilization. Leave the mountains and their harsh beauty behind. Zeke remained silent. The choice belonged to Ophelia. She had earned the right to claim any future she desired. Thank you for the opportunity. But our home is in the mountains. Relief flooded through him. Home, she had called it home. The journey back took 2 days through spring-warmed valleys. Wildflowers painted the meadows in shades of hope. Everything felt different now. Cleaner. Free from the shadows that had haunted their early months. At the cabin, Ophelia began making changes immediately. She cleared space for a larger garden, sketched plans for additional rooms. Their temporary arrangement was becoming permanent in every way. Expecting company? Maybe. Her smile held secrets. I've been corresponding with the Territorial Education Board about establishing a school. The idea took shape as she explained. Families scattered throughout the mountain valleys needed education for their children. Native tribes seeking integration with changing times. Mixed-race families caught between two worlds. Right here, close enough. The old mining camp at Willow Creek, empty buildings, good water, central location. She had been planning this for weeks, using her connections with territorial officials to secure funding and supplies. What about teachers? I'll start alone, but there are others, women seeking purpose beyond marriage, men with education but not opportunities. Zeke understood. She was building something larger than a school, a community, a place where outcasts and misfits could find belonging, like they had found each other. Summer brought the first families. Word spread through mountain communities about the teacher who welcomed everyone. Native children sat beside white settlers' sons. Mixed-race girls learned mathematics alongside recent immigrants' daughters. The school opened in September with 23 students. Ophelia taught reading and arithmetic in the morning. Zeke offered practical skills in the afternoon. Hunting, tracking, wilderness survival. Their cabin became a way station for traveling families. Teachers and supplies heading to remote settlements. Government officials inspecting territorial progress. The isolation that had once protected them transformed into connection. October brought a letter with Eastern postmarks. Ophelia recognized the publisher's seal immediately. Harper's Monthly wants to serialize your articles, book publication to follow. She read the offer twice before the words fully registered. Her writing would reach audiences across the nation. Stories of frontier life and mountain justice. Frontier Bride, a mountain marriage. Her working title had caught their attention. Accurate enough, close. She leaned against his shoulder while reading contract terms. Though I might change the ending. How so? The bride wasn't abandoned. She was delivered to exactly where she belonged. That evening, she wrote acceptance letters by lamplight, but also correspondence with territorial officials about expanding the school. Her success would fund larger dreams. November brought early snow and their first wedding anniversary. They marked it quietly with shared memories and future plans. Any regrets? Zeke asked as they watched snow fall past the window. Only that it took so long to tell you I love you. The confession came easily now. Months of partnership had eroded their careful emotional defenses. I married you because I saw strength, not because I pitied you. I said yes because I saw kindness, not because I was desperate. The words they should have spoken months ago finally found voice. December brought news of Wickham's death in territorial prison. Ophelia felt no satisfaction in his demise. Justice served its purpose. Revenge held no appeal. Spring arrived early the following year. With it came official recognition of their school's success, territorial funding for expansion, requests for similar programs throughout the region. Ophelia's book achieved publication to widespread acclaim. Eastern readers devoured stories of frontier courage and unlikely romance. Critics praised her honest portrayal of territorial life, but success couldn't improve on contentment already found. She worked in their expanded garden while Zeke repaired the school's roof. Students would arrive soon for the new term, more families seeking education and opportunity. Their life had grown beyond the desperate circumstances that brought them together. What began as mutual rescue had become genuine partnership. Mrs. Thornfield, a student's voice called from the trail, "Letter for you." Another publishing offer. Another opportunity to claim fame and fortune in distant cities. Ophelia read the proposal without interest. Her stories belonged to these mountains. Her heart belonged to the man who had seen her worth when others saw only unwanted goods. She folded the letter and filed it with similar offers. Some treasures were too valuable to trade. That evening, she sat at her writing desk composing new articles. Stories of mountain education and community building. Of love found in unlikely circumstances and futures built from hope. Zeke read beside the fire, his skills improved beyond recognition. The deserter had become a teacher. The abandoned bride had become an author. Both had found redemption in the recognition of worth that others had missed. Outside, wind through the pines whispered of seasons turning, of new challenges and continuing growth. Inside, lamplight caught on wedding rings worn smooth by honest work and genuine affection. The mountain man had married the abandoned bride that first day, but love had taken longer to arrive. It had been worth the wait, and that is all to the story for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel, and if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.